Welcome to the first in a series of videos on the politics of technology. Now, this is a particular research interest of mine. Ever since my PhD thesis, which I completed almost 12 years ago now, my PhD was on the general theme of internet governance. And since that time, internet governance, but also the politics of technology more broadly, have been a key research area of mine, and I've continued to work and publish in this area. And of course, one of the biggest hot topics right now in terms of the politics of technology and the regulation of technology is artificial intelligence and the potential impact of artificial intelligence on society. And of course, much of the current discourse is around the doomsday scenario and around the potential for AI to become a threat to humanity. And I think that this is a very valid concern. However, assuming that the doomsday scenario is avoided, what is unavoidable, I think, is the fact that AI is going to have a huge impact on society and on economics. AI is going to change the world in a big way, whether we like it or not. And I think one of the issues that requires more discussion and merits much more discussion is the potential for AI to impact upon patterns of inequality in society. Is AI likely to be a solution to some of the inequalities that we see in society? Or indeed is AI likely to exacerbate inequality? So that's the theme of this video. So the term artificial intelligence, of course, refers to that field of computer science which is focused on creating hardware and software with the ability to mimic, or at least appear to mimic, human intelligence. The ability to learn, the ability to reason, the ability to solve problems, the ability to make decisions. Now, AI is not a new field. It has been around in one form or another for decades, but it's only in recent years that there has been a huge explosion of interest in and investment in AI systems. And this has been brought about by some significant technological advances linked to, first of all, to the increase in power of computer systems, but also innovations in AI algorithms and the development of machine learning systems, the development of neural networks. And these advancements have prompted a drive to implement AI systems across a wide range of sectors of the economy and society. And it's this AI revolution, this sort of mass implementation of AI, which is still pretty new and still ongoing, and we don't yet fully know what the long-term effects, the long-term impacts will be on human society, but it's a pretty fair bet that they will likely be quite profound. So, of course, much of the current focus is on the dangers, the potential dangers of AI, and this is where the attention of governments and industry leaders has tended to be mainly focused. And of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with the nightmare scenario, which has been explored many times, of course, in science fiction. The idea that machines will become smart, that they will develop an intelligence that will exceed our own, and that they will become malevolent, that they will see no further use for humans, and that they will seek to take over and potentially eliminate us. Now, how likely is that scenario? That's a very pertinent question, and I certainly don't think we should dismiss that question. Fortunately, political and industry leaders are taking that question very seriously, although whether they will be able to agree on a set of workable regulations which will mitigate against these dangers remains to be seen. But I think certainly there is a broad recognition of the need to find solutions and to ensure that AI is developed according to responsible and ethical principles, to ensure that the systems being developed are beneficial and don't develop in the worst case, into the nightmare scenario. So there is a need to identify and develop techniques and protocols to ensure that, particularly if artificial general intelligence were to emerge, that such systems would align with human values and not end up causing existential threats. So again, this is not my main focus in this presentation, but obviously it's something that is a very pertinent issue and something that we need to be very much aware of. If we're talking about the ethics and the impact of AI, then of course we need to be very much aware of the worst case scenario. There are, of course, other ethical issues as well, even short of artificial general intelligence turning into Skynet and taking it upon itself to eliminate humanity entirely. At a slightly less sort of existential level, but still very challenging, we have the prospect of completely autonomous weapon systems being developed. Of course, we've seen in modern warfare, and the ongoing conflict in Ukraine is a very good example of this. We've seen the importance of drones, the way in which drone technologies are revolutionizing many aspects of warfare. But the current generation of drones tend to be human controlled. They are remotely controlled by humans. So there is always a human in the loop, if you like. But a set of systems are currently being developed in all areas of warfare, on land, in the air, in the sea, and under the seas, and potentially in space as well. A set of systems are being developed which basically will be completely autonomous. They will have integrated artificial intelligence, and they will have the ability to autonomously take decisions to kill humans. And there are obvious, I think, philosophical and ethical issues around that. You know, should a machine ever be in a position to make a decision to kill a human without a human in the loop? Should a machine ever, be able to take the decision to take human life? I think there are, lots of philosophical and ethical questions around that. And I don't think there's been quite so much public awareness of this. There are groups like, in particular, the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, which are campaigning to try to raise public awareness and to try to create pressure for arms control treaties to limit the development of these weapon systems. Again, how workable is that going to be? I'm not sure. I mean, of course, there is a history of arms control agreements with other types of weapons technology, such as nuclear and chemical and biological weapons and landmines and other types of weapons. So arms control treaties have been implemented before with some degree of success. But ultimately, any agreement is only going to work if everyone signs it and everyone adheres to it. If some countries, in particular some leading powers, decided not to adhere to any treaty that might emerge, then it's not going to work. Any arms control regime can only work if everyone agrees to adhere to it. And if some powers, particularly great powers, decide that they aren't going to be a part of that regime, then obviously it's not going to work. And of course, the realist way of thinking, which still heavily influences many governments, is going to give them temptation to try to gain an advantage, to try to gain a power advantage by being the first to develop these systems, or to develop more advanced versions of these systems. And of course, history tells us that when major technological changes come along, when major military advancements take place, major innovations come along like this, it very often leads to arms races. And of course we've seen that again and again throughout history. So the danger of an arms race involving the development of autonomous weapons like these is very real, with all of the ethical implications and dangers that that brings. So it just seems, at least to me, at least to my way of thinking, that there's something not quite right. There's something philosophically just not quite right about the idea of machines deciding to kill humans. There are, of course, other concerns around these types of weapons as well. So the potential for mistakes, how good is the judgment of these systems? Can they, for example, tell a civilian apart from a combatant? I mean, humans can't always reliably do that, but at least with a human in the loop, there's perhaps, with human judgment involved, there's perhaps more of a chance of avoiding mistakes. There's less chance of mistakes being made in distinguishing civilians from combatants. And also, we don't necessarily know how AI weapon systems are going to behave. That's the thing about artificial intelligence systems. Because they are learning systems, they can be prone to behaving in ways that were not predicted or not intended even by their creators. So if these are learning systems, we can't quite be sure whether they will end up behaving in ways that were not anticipated. There's also the lack of accountability and the difficulty of determining exactly who should be held accountable for decisions made by these systems. So, for example, if one of these systems goes rogue and commits an atrocity, who do we hold responsible for that? Do we hold the military responsible? Is it the responsibility of the commander on the ground, the person who ordered the weapon system deployed? Is it the politicians? Is it the creator of the system? And if it's the creator of the system, is it the company, or is it the programmer who is personally liable? You know, who do we hold accountable for decisions made by an artificial intelligence, particularly if war crimes are involved, for example? Of course, we've also already mentioned as well the potential for arms races and the destabilizing effects that could have on the international system, and also the potential for these systems to create a new era of hyperwar. Because, of course, the power of modern artificial intelligence, the power of modern computer systems, means that they can think and make decisions much faster, potentially thousands of times faster than any human. So potentially that could create a new era in warfare where decisions are made faster than any human can keep up with or even comprehend. So perhaps we're talking about a new era of warfare, which is going to put a new spin on the term lightning war. The idea of hyperwar between armies of machines with humans caught in the middle. Of course, humans are always caught in the middle. Civilians are always caught in the middle of any warfare. But we're perhaps talking about a type of warfare and a speed and intensity of warfare that's never been seen before. An intensity and speed of conflict that is completely incomprehensible to a human being. And it's perhaps not an exaggeration to say that these technologies and their destructive capability could be as dangerous as traditional weapons of mass destruction, like nuclear weapons. So certainly the UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has been calling for a ban on the development of these kinds of technologies since at least 2018, arguing that these weapons are morally repugnant as well as politically unacceptable. So again, there is talk at quite high levels of the potential to develop an arms control regime around these technologies, but again, the political and practical issues of devising such a regime and ensuring that the major players sign up to it and abide by it, these challenges are potentially quite daunting. and currently no concrete steps have been taken towards the implementation of such a regime. So these issues are clearly both very topical and very important when we're talking about the impact of AI. However, this is not my main focus in this presentation. This presentation is focused more on the potential impact of artificial intelligence on patterns of inequality and social injustice. I think many of us are already aware of the potential for AI to transform working patterns as well as other aspects of society. And in particular, of course, there's a lot of concern about loss of jobs and so on. But I'm not sure if there's been quite so much discussion about the implications of that, both the economic and the societal implications of that. And certainly consideration, not just in terms of economic inequality, the obvious consequences of people losing their jobs, but also the potential dangers of placing machines in charge of decision making within organizations, the potential for automated decision making to possibly exacerbate existing patterns of bias and discrimination, the potential unintended consequences of relying upon machine-made decisions in terms of exacerbating these existing inequalities. So let's consider in a bit more depth some of the ways in which artificial intelligence, the implementation of artificial intelligence systems might impact upon inequalities. So again, the most obvious and probably the most talked about issue revolves around labour market disparities, in particular job displacement, the possibility or indeed the likelihood that automation, AI-driven automated systems will displace many human workers and take over many human jobs. And as AI advances and becomes more capable, we're not just talking about replacing humans in low-skilled jobs, we're talking about whole sectors of the economy where whole professions, including white-collar professions, could potentially be wiped out. And of course, mass job loss is obviously going to have a direct economic impact and a huge impact on the lives and the prosperity of large sections of the population. Now, of course, the counter argument is that AI systems will actually create lots of new jobs, not just in terms of developing and maintaining the AI systems themselves, but also the idea that AI, rather than necessarily completely replacing human workers, will work alongside humans. And that by working together and combining human creativity with the power of AI, this will create lots of new advances and will open up lots of new employment opportunities and new economic opportunities. And indeed, that may be the case for some people in some cases. But then we have to ask, who are these opportunities going to be available to? Because ultimately they are likely to require, in many cases, specialist education, specialist skills training. So the question becomes, okay, who is going to be able to access that and who isn't? And therefore, who is going to be advantaged and who is going to be disadvantaged by these developments? And of course, the people, in particular the corporations who control and own these AI technologies, may very well stand to make big profits from that. And certainly, of course, that's the whole reason why major companies are investing so much money and resources into trying to develop these technologies, because they expect to profit from it. But of course, that potentially is only going to exacerbate income and wealth inequality. There are those who potentially stand to make huge amounts of money from the AI revolution. They are the winners, but there are also, on the other side of the equation, the people who are going to lose out because of this technological revolution. The rise of AI also alters the balance between capital and labour, and I'll come back to talk more about this later on. But this is potentially a huge change if we look at it, for example, from a Marxist perspective. Not that I am myself a Marxist as such, but I do feel that the Marxist perspective does have some useful things to tell us about the nature of capitalism. And from a Marxist perspective, ultimately, labour is the source of all wealth. Ultimately, all wealth is created through labour power, and the relationship between capital and labour is the basis of human society from a Marxist perspective. Again, not that I am myself a Marxist as such, but I think it is useful nonetheless to conceptualise the capitalist economic system and the society that it underpins in this way. And of course, by replacing human labour with artificial labour, that really alters this equation. And so then we have to consider, what does that do? What are the implications of this? Not just for the economic basis of society, but for the superstructure, for the broader society, which is built upon this economic relationship. And of course, it's not just about ownership of AI, but also access to the benefits that it may bring. Because, of course, there are potentially a lot of benefits from the AI revolution. I'm certainly not denying that AI could bring huge benefits. But the real question is, who is going to be able to access those benefits? Who is going to be excluded from accessing those benefits? And in particular, I'm thinking of communities in the global south. Are they going to have the same opportunities to benefit from these innovations as communities in the global north, who are perhaps wealthier, in a better place to begin with? So there's a very real danger that the advent of the AI revolution will entrench and exacerbate these existing disparities between global north and global south. Entrenching and exacerbating these existing inequalities. So the developed world, the global north, the countries which have the resources and the technology to get ahead in the AI race are obviously going to have an advantage, and less developed countries lacking those resources, lacking that investment, lacking that technology, are going to be left even further behind. So, for example, the IMF conducted a study in 2020 which predicted that improvements in the productivity of what they call robots, but basically artificial intelligence systems, automated systems, would drive further divergence between the wealthy and the developing worlds. So we may see investment capital flowing to the already developed world at the expense of the global south, and this may result in a permanent decline in GDP for developing countries, and particularly those development countries which rely heavily upon unskilled labour, the sorts of jobs which are most likely to be replaced early on by automated systems. There are other issues as well. So the prediction is that AI systems could be increasingly relied upon to make decisions in many different areas of society, from public services, national and local governmental decisions, civil service decisions, public policy decisions, through to business decisions at all levels of business, from strategic boardroom level down to kind of the shop floor level, and including things like hiring and firing of employees, for example. There may be much more reliance on AI to make these sorts of decisions, and even in areas like policing and criminal justice as well. And the issue is that reliance on AI to make these sorts of decisions raises lots of issues, particularly issues around the potential for bias in the AI system. Now, at first glance, you may say, well, AI bias, how can a machine be biased? Surely that's impossible. Surely by its very nature, a machine is dispassionate. The machine doesn't have prejudices, the machine doesn't have preconceptions, a machine doesn't make assumptions, a machine surely is purely logical and therefore can't be biased. But in fact, the issue of AI bias is a very real thing. Bias in AI systems tends to arise as a result of human biases being baked into the system. If we remember that AI systems are trained using pre-existing data, and if the data that is used to train an AI system contains pre-existing biases, then the AI system will learn and perpetuate those biases. And maybe those biases will even be amplified, particularly if a feedback loop is created where the biased decisions produced by the AI system then produce more data, which is then used to train future AI systems. The loop becomes self-reinforcing over time. It creates a feedback loop, and this can create discriminatory outcomes. To explain what I mean, to illustrate this point, let's take the example of AI and gender bias in employment. So if AI systems, for example, are relied upon to make decisions around hiring and firing and promotion and so on, let's consider how this might, for example, impact women. So to begin with, AI algorithms might be used to screen job applications and decide on which candidates will be shortlisted for interview. So if those algorithms are biased, they might unfairly penalise applications from women. How could that happen? Well, it may be that past hiring decisions were already biased. Maybe there's a pre-existing bias within a particular industry. Maybe this industry has been male dominated in the past and has mostly hired men. So if this past data is used to train the AI system may then itself come to favour men and be more likely to select male candidates. So the pre-existing human bias becomes baked into the AI system. It becomes transferred to the AI system. We could see similar things happening with regards to other decisions within the organization. So for example, performance and evaluation and job roles. So again, based on past data around the kind of jobs that women did within the organization and the kind of jobs that men did within the organization, the AI system might be inclined to promote men disproportionately to certain positions and to direct women to other positions which were kind of more traditionally the roles played by women within the organization. And similarly in terms of training opportunities, development opportunities and so on being offered, again we might see existing inequalities and existing biases within the organisation, existing discriminatory practices being perpetuated and perhaps even being amplified as a result of transference to the AI system. And again, this could, even impact pay awards, for example. If the AI systems are using historical data to make decisions on salary offers, for example, and if women were previously paid less, then again, the AI system might perpetuate that. So that's just one example of where AI bias might perpetuate pre-existing inequalities. But we can imagine lots of other concerns as well, where the implementation of AI systems to make decisions and to perform certain tasks may result in different populations or different sections of the population being treated unequally. So again, in terms of course, massive issue in itself, surveillance and data collection, the widespread use of AI for surveillance and for data collection, which is a massive topic in itself because of the potential to infringe on individual privacy rights, but particularly if the algorithms are targeting certain people and certain groups disproportionately, then this becomes even more of an issue. And in areas like, the legal system, if we're talking about criminal justice sentencing, if we're talking about areas like predictive policing, which I'll go on in a moment to explain a little bit more what that is. The certain groups may be disproportionately impacted by the use of AI to make these sorts of decisions. And conversely, those who are better off with better legal representation may be better protected against the impacts of these developments. Predictive policing can be quite controversial for a number of reasons. This term predictive policing is kind of a catch-all term to refer to a number of different approaches and techniques which apply artificial intelligence not only to catch perpetrators of known crimes, people who have committed a crime already, but also, much more controversially, the use of predictive systems to identify individuals who are deemed to be likely to commit crime in the future. And also, predictive policing can refer to techniques to identify places and scenarios where crime might be likely to occur, besides individuals who might be likely to commit crime. And again, when we're talking about identifying places which may be high risk, that's perhaps a little bit less controversial. But when we're talking about targeting individuals, not for something that they have done, but for something that they possibly might do in the future, that is controversial for obvious reasons. There are obviously significant issues around that in terms of ethics and principles of justice. Is it fair to target someone for surveillance, for being monitored, for being stopped and searched, just on the basis of something that they haven't actually done yet, but might do in the future? And no other grounds for suspicion other than the system says that they fit certain criteria. There are obvious issues with this, and even if it was being applied on an equal basis across the population, there would still be issues with this. But obviously it becomes even more of a problem when we realise that bias is likely to creep in with regards to various characteristics, which could include things, for example, like ethnic background. You may well end up with a situation where people from a particular ethnic background, for example, are more likely to be stopped and searched or subjected to surveillance because the system has these built-in biases. Because once again, it may be that the training data is already skewed, already corrupted due to human biases and institutional biases, and this then has become baked into the AI system. So, for example, it may be that people from a particular ethnic background have historically been more likely to be arrested. Why is this? Well, in at least some cases, it may be due to institutional racism. Now, I'm not going to say that all police are racist, because I don't think that's fair, I don't think that's true. But nonetheless, there is quite a lot of evidence that in at least some cases, institutional racism is a thing. And of course, this is been topical in the news. We know that institutional racism does exist. And of course, this may lead to, for example, this may lead to more black people being arrested, black people being disproportionately likely to be arrested because of biased perceptions and biased assumptions in the policing system. And of course, if that is the case, if the historical data around arrests, for example, is already biased, this leads to the statistics already been skewed, and if this data is then used to train an AI, then that institutional bias will become embedded in the system and will be perpetuated and may even be exacerbated. With regards to AI-based facial recognition systems, there is a growing body of research which has found disparities in the ability of such systems to accurately recognize individuals from different ethnic groups. So again, probably because, at least in the West, because the systems have been trained predominantly using images of white people, the systems tend to be more accurate at correctly identifying individuals of a white ethnic background, but people from a black ethnic background are much more likely to be misidentified, to be falsely identified by such systems. And this raises obvious issues of bias, particularly if these systems are being used by police and by the justice system, for example. So while such biases may only be a small percentage difference in a large population sample, at the level of individuals, this could lead to serious issues around people being falsely arrested. One would hope not falsely convicted, because one would hope that in court this biased data would be challenged, but even then, it's difficult to be sure. But certainly we could see people from certain ethnic backgrounds facing much more harassment, much more likely to be falsely arrested, falsely accused, falsely stopped and searched, falsely questioned, due to inherent biases in facial recognition systems. So these are serious issues, but in the final part of this presentation I want to talk about the impact of AI on capitalism, and whether the capitalist economic system as we know it can survive the AI revolution. And of course this has obvious implications for matters of economic inequality, because again, certainly from a Marxist perspective, the capitalist system is inherently unequal. And again, I don't want to get into a debate about the rights and wrongs of that, and the rights and wrongs of capitalism, because that's not my primary focus. But I think it's fair to say, and I think most people, whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, I think most people would agree that a capitalist system is always going to result in economic disparities. It's not possible for under a capitalist system. It's not possible for people to for wealth to be distributed equally. And again, whether you think that's a good thing or a bad thing is not something that I want to get into a discussion about. But the point is that a capitalist system always, inevitably leads to disparities of wealth. And so the question of whether the capitalist system itself will survive the AI revolution is obviously needs to be pretty central to a discussion of AI and inequality. So these issues are, of course, extremely topical at the moment. For example, the impact of AI on the future of the labour market was one of the key issues discussed in the well-publicised, the televised discussion between British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and Elon Musk at the recent summit on AI at the beginning of November 2023. And as part of that discussion, Elon Musk made a prediction that advancements in AI will ultimately put an end to the traditional labour market, that traditional jobs will no longer exist, will no longer be required, that a human workforce will no longer be required. And of course, as Musk himself acknowledged, this has very profound implications for the future of society. And it certainly isn't an isolated prediction. It's not just Elon Musk saying this. It's widely predicted, widely expected, that these developments, particularly AI, but also associated technological advances, will revolutionize production and maybe not eliminate human workers altogether, but certainly vastly reduce the number of workers required, and not just in sort of unskilled manual jobs, although those may be some of the first to go, but increasingly, because of the increasing capabilities of AI, increasingly traditional white-collar jobs as well. So we're talking about a vast reduction in the workforce. And you know, from one perspective, you might say that, well, this is a good thing for capitalists. This has to be, you know, beneficial to the interests of capital, because reduced labour costs mean increased profits. Traditionally, of course, you know, one of the ways to increase profit is to keep labour costs to a minimum, to reduce your labour costs, reduce your overheads. So at first glance, this might sound like bad news for labour, but good news for capital. But of course, there's an obvious problem here. There's an obvious elephant in the room, and this is the fact that the labour force are not just an overhead for business. They are also the consumers. They are the people who buy the products that are produced by business. They are the people who provide the market. Capitalism obviously works to the laws of supply and demand. Without demand, there is no need for supply, and there is no profit. And the problem is that if a large fraction of the population is suddenly not working, and therefore not earning, they then cannot afford to buy goods and services. So demand falls dramatically, and businesses stop making profit and therefore go bust. The investors in those businesses will lose their investment, and the economy as we know it will collapse. So AI is essentially useless if the plebs, the consumers, don't have some form of exchange. They have to have money to be able to buy goods and services in order to create a market. Otherwise, the whole system will collapse. Now, one potential solution that has been suggested to this problem is the idea of providing a universal basic income. The idea that the state will provide everyone, whether they are working or not, will provide everyone with a basic income, and therefore everyone can continue to act as a consumer, and the market is preserved and the economy keeps running. That's the idea, and at first glance it sounds workable. But again, there's an obvious problem, and the problem is, where's the money going to come from? It would cost an enormous amount of money to pay every adult a government income. I've only looked at the figures for the UK, but obviously it's going to be similar in other countries. To pay every adult in the UK £20,000 per year, of course it could be some other figure, but £20,000 is one of the figures that I've seen suggested, and this is not a large income by modern standards. The current average median income in the UK, I believe, is something like £35,000 per year. So we're talking a figure which is significantly, very significantly less than the current average income in the UK. But to pay every adult in the UK £20,000 per year would cost in the region of £1 trillion per year. Now, to put that in context, that's about the same as the entire annual government budget. And therefore, assuming other spending remains the same, the government budget will be close to doubled. It won't quite be doubled because quite a few people are already getting their income from the government, so it wouldn't quite double the budget, but close enough. And when you consider that the entire GDP of the UK is only £2.3 trillion, where is this money coming from to pay the universal basic income? So this is going to require near 100% taxation of business. And that means the effective end of private profits. And of course, that essentially means the end of the capitalist model. The whole point of the capitalist model is to generate profit. The whole reason for existence of a business under the capitalist system is to generate profit. And if all of your profits are being paid to the government in the form of taxes, then your business isn't viable anymore. There's no point in running your business from a capitalist perspective. So 100% taxation means that the capitalist system can no longer function. So either way, capitalism can't survive. Either you have a situation where much of the population don't have an income or don't have sufficient income to buy goods and services, which is going to cause business to collapse, or alternatively you tax business 100%, which also is going to mean an end to capitalist economics. Either way, capitalism can't survive. Now, I don't think I can overstate just how big, just how fundamental a change this would be in the economic basis of society. It would be a transformation that would be on a par with the Industrial Revolution or the invention of farming. It would be a pivotal moment in human history. And that moment may be almost upon us. The obvious question that then arises, of course, is, well, what replaces capitalism? What comes next? And of course, the traditional Marxist answer is that capitalism, once swept away, will be superseded by a communist society where economic inequality would become a thing of the past. Of course, Karl Marx himself never really went into kind of a great deal of detail about what such a communist society would look like, but there was this assumption that the divide between rich and poor, the polarization in society would be a thing of the past, and that each person would contribute to the collective good, and each person would have their needs met. So a utopian society, really, or at least much closer to utopian society than previously seen under the capitalist system, or prior to that, the feudal and slave-based economies of antiquity. So, does AI enable such a utopian vision? And again, optimists have argued that it does. that we have the opportunity to move towards a utopian society where machines will do much of the work, and humans will be freed up to pursue higher goals. So, is that a likely outcome, or are we looking at a dystopian future where AI and the benefits of AI are in the hands of the few, and the rest of the global population are not simply disadvantaged, but actually become surplus to requirements? So, drawing upon science fiction to illustrate, are we talking about the kind of society that is depicted in Star Trek? A utopian society where the acquisition of wealth is no longer the driving force behind human behaviour, a post-scarcity society where humans are freed to pursue higher goals and work towards bettering themselves, bettering the rest of humanity, rather than the pursuit of profit. A very positive, very optimistic view of the future. Is that what we're looking at? Or, conversely, will the future look much more like this classic episode of The Twilight Zone, The Obsolete Man? So, what do you think? As always, comments are very welcome, so if you've got any thoughts or opinions or views that you'd like to share on this topic, then please feel free to add those in the comments section below. And if you have found this video interesting, then please like and perhaps consider subscribing to my channel, and check out the rest of my content on international relations and related topics. Hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks very much.